Good evening, everybody, and Happy New Year. You're listening to America Now. I'm Barb Adams. Thanks so much for joining me. I've got 3 interesting topics for you tonight, beginning with some predictions about what 2016 might hold in store for us. Then in hour 2, we're going to hear from a counterterrorism expert on how terrorism is financed and how to stop it. Finally, in the third hour, a fascinating discussion on how to talk to an alien. Perhaps 2016 will be the year we actually need to learn exolinguistics. All this and more, so I hope you stay for the entire show. If you do miss any part, though, you can always listen to this or any of my shows in their entirety in the archives or podcasts. Well, 2015's in the rearview mirror and 2016 lies ahead. You know, with a new year comes those renewed hopes for things to be better for us as individuals as well as a nation. So what will 2016 hold in store for us? Joining me now to do a bit of prognosticating about 2016 is author and former statewide prosecutor and Deputy Attorney General of New Jersey, John J. Higgins. Together, we form Practical Solutions for America, and we ask you join us here on air each week and on Facebook in discussing the challenges present-day America's facing. John, Happy New Year. You got your crystal ball all ready?
Happy New Year, of course. I'm over here warming it up.
Well, good. Mine fell on the floor and broke. I don't know, what kind of sign that is, but I don't know that's a good one.
Yeah, I don't think that's good.
Yeah, exactly. I guess I'll have to use the 8-ball instead. I don't know. I have to ask you one thing, though. It seems like about a year ago or so when we did this, when we started all this, you had a little earthquake in New Jersey, and I was kidding you about that. I noticed today in the news there was a rare and unusual earthquake again early this morning there in New Jersey. Did you feel it?
No, not at all. But I heard Chris Christie landed.
Okay,
he's finally back in the state.
Well, that was it.
I don't know. I see these things too on the news. But where I am, we don't feel anything, I guess.
Well, that's good. It may be good not to feel some of the things coming down the pike, but let's hope that 2016 is a better year. And I think people are really kind of holding their collective breath right now, especially with the big issue, the big event that's going to happen in 2016. Obviously, the presidential race. Got any predictions on that one?
Oh, well, the first prediction I have is we're going to have an extra day this year.
Oh, well, okay, that's right. That's true.
So it'll be a day of reprieve for most of us.
Yeah.
Anyone with bills, you get an extra day. But, the presidential thing, I think, is just going to go. I think it might be on steroids this time. I don't know that the last time it's going to be as interesting as what it's going to be, this round. I think it's going to get really nasty before it's over. I think they've been holding back somewhat. We haven't been bombarded with the ads, but, now the starting gun is fired and the airwaves are going to be loaded. If you think about how much money is sitting in these political campaign coffers, particularly on the Republican side, that, they're going to be spending money left and right.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, we may already be in debate fatigue, but I think we better prep ourselves, as you say, for the campaign ad overdose, because really the races and all of that, the spending's going to far exceed what we saw in 2012, and that's really kind of scary. We're just going to be overwhelmed with it, and I think we're already overwhelmed. We've already had a year, before this year finally hit. So you have any predictions as to who might take the races? Both sides.
Well, I actually think before it's over, it's going to be pretty much a 4-way race. There's going to be Trump, who's... I have a sense the Republicans are going to pull some kind of stunt if he's getting ahead. I think they're laying the groundwork that they're going to put in what they think is a normal candidate to oppose him, and whether they do some kind of brokered convention or something along those lines. I think that they're they're getting desperate in terms of trying to separate themselves, from him. And I think that's going to be a real disaster for them, because he's going to run one way or the other, and that's going to split whatever vote they have. So I think that, I don't think they're going to win no matter what happens. But I think Hillary's almost got the same problem in some ways, because Sanders has really been building a lot of grassroots support, and particularly among young, which has really not been, a group that's been tapped into for basically a long time. Obama got some of it, but I don't think they were really so aware. This is almost like the 1960s to me, with the groundswell that he's getting in terms of support. So if he doesn't win, he may be graceful and not, withdraw from, becoming an independent candidate, but I think there's going to be a lot of write-ins for him.
I think there'll be a lot of write-ins, and then again, if Trump runs as an independent, would it be possible that Sanders then decides, well, what the heck? He's going to split up the Republican Party. I'm just going to go ahead. I've got enough, groundswell movement behind me. I'm just going to go ahead and go too. So we could have a couple of independents running, as you mentioned, John. It could be a four-way race. Make it pretty interesting.
Well, you know what? In some ways, I think it would be a breath of fresh air. Yeah. Because, the political parties, which were never established by the Constitution, regardless of what the people's beliefs may be, they didn't have a two-party system back then. And that kind of just built up on its own over the years. So the idea that there'd be more than just the two establishment candidates running, it may open up things in the future that we might have a better selection.
Yeah, well, we certainly have needed to have a better selection. You and I talk about that all the time here during this first hour of the show. But I think right now people are, as you say, John, they're tired of the two-party system because we've become so divided, so polarized. It's become like a big football game. It's one team versus the other. Well, no, it's not. We're the people caught in the middle. We're the people basically mostly funding this stuff, and we want our votes to count again. And I think that's another thing that's going to be taken on here. And I noticed something about Obama recently. Have you noticed that President Obama is finally starting to catch fire here? And he's starting to speak up, especially about the big money. He's kind of taking it on.
Well, it's about time. I think the biggest problem, even though we have two political parties, in many ways, in many of the positions on a lot of the problems facing the country, it's really the same voice from different sides of the aisle. It's rare that they're really disagreeing on dealing with the moneyed issues, and they still pass legislation that, sometimes I'm shocked when you see who votes for some of this stuff. It's from both sides of the aisle, because of all the legalized bribery that we call campaign finance, and with them taking all this money from these corporations. They all owe them, so they keep making more and more progress in terms of pulling money from us, but no protections for the common, middle class, citizen.
Yep, I think that's going to change too, and it's going to really get to be a big issue in 2016. Right, we're heading to a break here, John, so we can continue this right here when we return. All right, stay with us. More to come here on America Now. Right, everybody, welcome back. John Higgins joining me this hour. We're kind of talking about, predicting what's going to come in 2016, but I think most of us are sitting looking at the bigger issues. Obviously, we talked about the presidential race, but I think the economy, John, is another big one. I think everybody's hoping for the best here. A real infusion of money in the economy to really put jobs back in place in this country would really help.
Yeah, we're still in the position that, I think many of the jobs are going overseas, and I don't really think the economy has really recovered regardless of what they're saying with the numbers. I'm always really suspect of the number of unemployed, because they changed the way they calculate it at some point that I don't think has been realistic for a long time. And I think that one of the dangers of what they're doing at the moment is with the Fed starting to raise interest rates. I mean, I don't think anybody has recovered any of the money they've been expending in the rainy day funds that they've been expending, and to increase the cost of credit for housing and credit cards and all of that, which most people are already in that now, is only going to give the banks more money for the money they lent when it was cheap. I think that could be a real disaster.
Yeah, well, I'd sure love to see it, though, and I know you would, too, where we get some of those controls on the interest rates, so it isn't exactly the banks that are always benefiting from the actions of the Fed.
Yeah, and someplace along the line, I think we lost the usury laws because, when I was in law school, the whole idea of any interest rate above 18% was considered usury, and it was illegal. Now, they can go up to, 30-some-odd%, I think, yep. Which you probably could borrow money from the mob for the same kind of payback rate. And, that really crushes the middle class just as much as anything else. People aren't getting raises. I mean, I think that they shouldn't be raising any kind of interest rates or anything until people get really decent, raises. I think we discussed something about the military. They were going to get a 1%, raise in their salaries for the soldiers. I mean, 1% is a pittance.
Yeah, it is. It really is. And when you think about it, most people out there aren't really getting big raises either. I know personally in my family, my sister, her big raise as a manager this year, and her bonus, I think, was like $4. And a good friend of mine, he got his year-end bonus this year. It was like $32.33 or something like that. Oh, heavens. I mean, really? You can't even buy much of anything for that anymore. Yeah, so the wages, I think that will be a big thing this year. We're going to be, there are so many things that will be coming forth into 2016 as the carryovers from 2015 that I think a lot of people are going to be sitting out here going, all right, whether these politicians bring them up or not, we're going to be pushing them forward in 2016. We're going to be forcing people to see these things one way or the other.
Right, and I think that's going to help keep that groundswell pressure on the political parties because, the people not really doing well, the business as usual, I think, is going to start to change. Either that or we're going to go back into another recession and have one big mess. Everything, to me, still in the world is fragile. It's not like anything is booming anywhere, and that's not a good sign. We have not gotten ourselves to a healthy position yet. In New Jersey, our roads are still a disaster. There's a problem with our transportation fund. It's been, they kept borrowing against it, and we don't have all the money in there any longer. Now it's the money that's going in there is more for debt service than it is anything else. And still the roads aren't straightened out, and I don't think the federal government is in much better shape either with pumping money in to repair the roads and whatever. However, I'm sure that if there's a road that needs fixing in Afghanistan or Iraq, we'll be right there.
Yeah, well, I think that's the prediction I'm thinking, is the Middle East is going to become even more unsettled. I mean, we've got Iran coming up with that nuclear, the deal coming into effect now in 2016. There's going to be some big changes coming, and we don't yet know which way that's going to go. So that could mean a situation where, who knows, are we going to actually get involved, depending on who takes over Congress again, I suppose, and I'm predicting the Dems are going to pull it back again, but it's going to be close. But if they don't, we could end up with more and more people over in the Middle East again. And I think something's going to happen where most of us are going to have to unite as far as countries. I think that's one thing I'm seeing, is that there's going to be more and more of the other countries realizing we have to do something about ISIS and all this other terrorist activity, and we have to work together rather than individually doing these types of things. So I think I'm going to see that. But unfortunately, I think it's going to mean more domestic terrorism, both, homegrown and otherwise.
Well, I think ISIS, I never underestimate any of those people. They're smart, they're fast, They use a country's own weaknesses against it. You know, they're really, you know, like a modern day guerrilla force working across the entire world, and they know how to use social media and all of that. The downside for them is that what they do is they trigger everybody to come in after them. And the hard part over there is that it really is guerrilla warfare. And I don't see any way that you can do it without boots on the ground. And someone or one country or another somehow has to get the Iraqi army into a position that they're competent. And, you know, they stay on a course in cleaning up the mess in their own country. And I think that, you know, we need a Muslim army to do that. I mean, Sanders is right on that. We should not be in the lead. They should be putting their own people. They have more to lose than we do, and we need to keep that forefront in their minds that this is not an American problem.
Right. Yeah, I agree with you. We need that type of army to hopefully defeat ISIS and other potential threats coming after ISIS, and stabilize Syria, especially in Iraq, you know. But I think, again, what I see coming is more U.S. involvement, both in Syria and Iraq, just to get this done, or at least get it started. And that always involves us. You know, the odd one there, though, to me right now is Russia, because Russia's kind of sitting in the situation where they could be a big player. But it depends on the oil prices, because if oil prices stay low right now, Russia's going to be hurting. And whenever they start hurting to do the smoke and mirrors for their people, they always seem to resort to military maneuvers of some sort. You know, whether that's going to be a war in Syria or whether they're going to punish Turkey for shooting down that jet. It remains to be seen. All right, stay with us. More to come here on America Now. All right, everybody, doing a little predicting for 2016 here this hour with John Higgins. And John, where else do you want to go? What are some thoughts?
I wanted to just continue a little bit with the Putin stuff in the Middle East. Is that, you know, dictators generally like to have big armies around them. So that's one of the reasons that they want to start a war with another country and that sort of thing. But I think Putin is kind of in a bad position because I think that the Russians, their economy really is not going well, so that a war is going to be more of a drain on them. So I don't think he's going to really stay there very long, because it's going to create more tension at home. And if this was 1950, he would be safe in his position, but it's no longer that amount of, you know, Communist Party control over the citizenry. So I don't think he's going to be able to stay there long. And if he had a shortage of oil, it would make sense that he'd want the oil. But he's got his own, so he's got a problem there. So I think that we've got to be careful we don't get suckered into the idea that we've got to fight the Russians over there. I think that they will pull out. They're not going to stay. It's the Saudis that I probably have more concern about, because their economy really has relied on oil, and, you know, the main population there are really tightly controlled by the royal family. And I wouldn't be surprised if in the next year or so, all of a sudden the unrest in there destabilizes that power base.
Well, it's interesting, too, you know, when we're talking about all the terrorist activity here, and I'll be talking that in the second hour, well, the Saudis, you know, they remain our allies, and even on a couple of occasions have been referred to as friends. Well, they haven't been, and yet we have kept them that way for going on probably 70 years now or something. But, you know, so much of this unrest, we need to make them more accountable in that area. I mean, we really need to hold their feet to the fire about all of this, because so much of the unrest and so much of the financing of terrorism is coming from the Saudis.
Right. And I think that may be the beginning of the end of all of that, because part of the problem of all the tension over there is the existing structure that, you know, got created after World War I and World War II. It was never, they were seen as backwater countries back then, and wherever they drew the line was good enough. And I think that there's going to have to be some sort of rethinking of how that whole region is divided up, and perhaps it's better to let the Sunnis stay with the Sunnis and the Shias stay with the Shias, and stop some of this constant fighting that's been going on among them.
Yeah, but that constant fighting goes way back to about 647 or 57 BC. that's
right, and it wasn't a problem when they didn't have money, but now they have money, so they've been able to buy. Maybe we need to be banning weapons.
Well, that would be a start.
Weapons over there,
that would be a good start.
Yeah, they're not competing with modern weaponry any longer. They start being a few designs behind, so that we don't have to worry about them. Yeah, but I think that cauldron there is still, just a problem.
Yeah, going back to Putin, though, in Russia, he could always turn to his new best friend, Trump, if he has any problems over there. I mean, the two are now best buds, right?
Well, egotists like egotists, I think.
Yes, megalomaniacs like megalomaniacs, yes.
Yeah.
They use each other.
Hitler, Stalin, and the El Duce and the Emperor of Japan were all flying around in the same boat. So, I don't think that would hold up. And, Trump, in some ways, he doesn't scare me as much as some of the other candidates, to be honest with you. I think that even if he got in, I think that his ego would force him to try to make the presidency a success. The others, I'm not so sure. They're so tied to either religious fanaticism or corrupt that, them following their own path, I think, are higher risk than he would be.
Yeah, although with Trump, when he gets in there, even if his ego did, allow him to try to make good on governing, I think he'd have a difficult time because he's a business person and he's going to come in there with no real experience in governing, and he's not going to be able to work with the established government very well. I don't think they would receive him well as if you've heard anything of the speak from Europe. I mean, we've got England, France, and a couple of other countries over there saying that if Trump got in, they'd probably break relations with us. They would not, they wouldn't deal with him. That's not good either.
I don't think they'd have a choice, but I think that his problem, even if he gets in, is more the Jesse Ventura problem, is that no one owes him anything really, and the Republican Party, they're really not going to stay with him, and so when he goes to Congress to get something done, they'll probably have the same attitude that some of them had about Obama, was that their goal is to make his presidency, a failure, and they'll block any kind of legislation that he tries to put through. So I think that's where he'd really have his hands full. Yeah,
and that would, bode pretty poorly for all the rest of us out here. Looking at some of these other countries and going back to the Middle East, I think Turkey is really going to take center stage here, because really they're the main pathway for all these ISIS fighters to go through and flow through, and then the refugees are flowing out of Syria into Turkey. So I think Turkey's going to be a hot one this year, quite soon.
Yeah. Well, and I think the refugee situation is a potential of destabilizing Europe. That's why there's more and more of an urgency in terms of straightening out the territory there so that they can stay where they live rather than relocating everybody. I mean, in some ways, it's one of the most absurd solutions. You're going to remove all the people from where they live and spread them somewhere else because you can't control the region. I mean, that's like idiocy. That would be like we're going to clean out all the cities because we can't control crime. I mean, somebody hasn't thought that through very well, but why is that surprising?
I predict there's going to be more of that in 2016. More people not thinking these things through. But as far as the refugee situation, I think there's going to be some backlash in Europe now I think they're actually going to start closing some of the doors to the refugees, especially based after the Paris attacks and some of these other things going on. I think there will be a rise, potentially maybe, of what they would call the far right even over there now.
Oh, yeah. And when the economy is bad, that creates, more tension between the new immigrants and the people already there. And there is still the risk that they're trying to plant, terrorists in among them. And I think that any country that just does open arms without an extremely close vetting process is really just asking for trouble.
Yep,
So,
and I think, we saw that very well here. Look at what happened in San Bernardino. We were saying that how well we vet people, and yet look what slipped through and happened in San Bernardino. So I think everybody's quite wary right now about all of this. John, we're heading to another break here again, so when we pick it up, let's talk about some of the more not obscure, but just more mainstream, generalized, the weather and all those types of things. When we come back, let's make a few predictions on those. All right, stay with us. More to come from John Higgins and myself here on America Now. All right, everybody, welcome back. John Higgins and I predicting 2016. I'm not sure we're exactly predicting it, but it's, kind of what we'd like to see and what we think we're going to probably have happen in 2016. John, you want to go out there anywhere start us off with something?
Well, I think that what we're going to see is that there's going to be a lot more discussion about the middle class in the presidential run, and it may move both parties to focus on the problems of the middle class. I was, just thinking in the break that, Trump, one of his backgrounds is he owned a casino, and when you owned a casino here in New Jersey, at least, was that they would give free bus rides and $20 to the seniors to come down to the casinos. So I wouldn't be surprised that he starts offering some kind of benefit to vote for him.
Yeah, he'll have the buses out, right?
Right. And there may be a bidding war in the Republican Party on who can give the most to the middle class. No. Because the rich can't vote enough, and he doesn't need their money. So
right. Yeah, well, being out here in Colorado, I'm going to make my prediction. We're going to see a lot more legalization of pot.
Well, I mean, and in reality, in some ways, that's really a better way of dealing with it. They always had it classified in the wrong category. It's not as, there was no use for it at all, and that was just ridiculous. But that's a whole other topic.
Yeah, well, as you said, the feds are now going to start removing some of those penalties off of it, so that ought to just kind of put it out there in the mainstream now. And
right, it's a losing battle at this stage. So let the states make the decisions they want to make for it, and they'll all start with medical marijuana, which it should have always been anyway. I think that the government second guessing what a doctor does is absurd. Yep. And the same thing with an insurance company. An insurance company shouldn't second guess what a doctor decides. And you should use any tool you can to either ameliorate somebody's pain or to, try to make them healthy. So, hopefully that will be a good thing.
And I'm hoping big pharma there.
What was that?
Go ahead. I was going to say, when you're talking about insurance company stuff, I predict that big pharma and the insurance companies are going to get their comeuppance this year.
Oh, yeah. Well, they're all hiking the rates again, and the cost of medications. It's really unfair in this country, and that's why I say this groundswell that's starting is really a great thing, and starting to hold them accountable. And I think we have to start holding the banks accountable. They keep hiking the interest rates. That's going to cause its own problems, and I think there's going to be a backlash on that as well.
Yeah. There's going to be a lot of things where I think people are empowering themselves again and realizing, hey, wait a minute, we've been had for way too long. It's time we speak up and that our voices are heard. 2016, it's a 9-year. 9 is a completion number. So I think a lot of things are going to get stirred up and then completed. Maybe not towards the end of this next year in 2016, but I think the ball's going to really get rolling.
Well, and it's kind of refreshing to hear that Obama is, like, waking up to some degree.
He is.
Because, this is his last year. Whatever, he's pretty much lame duck already. So if he wants to leave a legacy, if he pushes the right way, I think Paul Ryan will probably go along with some of the stuff with him because he's trying to make a name for himself, and he saw what happened with, I can't think of the crying speaker, but where we just replaced. And it may not be as broken as what it's been over the last 8 years.
Yeah. And
he may be able to start moving, in some directions. If you have nothing to lose, maybe starting to take on the banks, the insurance companies, the unjust things that are in the tax code. Those would all be, good legacies that he could leave.
Mm-hmm. I think there will be a catharsis, and I'm going to say, I see him actually going to Cuba. I think that he's actually going to do it. So that would be kind of cool. That'd be very interesting. But I think, for some reason, I have a feeling he's going to make it to Cuba, and he's not going to care. He's felt held back and misunderstood for so long that you're right, John. He feels like, you know what? I'm free. I'm really free. It doesn't matter now. I'm on my way out. I'm not going to be a lame duck. He's going to go out like a bull.
Right. And the whole Cuban thing has gotten ridiculous. My uncle was Cuban. He got out under Batista. That was before Castro. And, they couldn't go back. They couldn't contact their relatives. I can understand for the first 5 or 10 years we thought that, Fidel was a threat, but what was he going to do, send an army from Cuba into Florida? It's like the mouse that roared kind of scenario, and to have an island 90 miles off the coast of the United States and we act as though they don't exist is ridiculous. So I think that that's a good thing. And if you really want to get rid of a dictator, let them see how democracy and people being able to earn, how well that works.
Yep, exactly. All right, let's do a little weather prediction. Obviously, El Nino. Those effects are going to continue through at least the spring.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised over here, though the weather is so fouled up, we're probably going to have snowstorms in April.
Yeah, well, you had a pretty mild winter thus far, haven't you?
Oh, today's the first real cold day. Most of it has been, I've been like scratching my head why I have a winter coat.
Yeah, we're flip-flopped. We, out here in the Southwest in California, we've been getting clobbered, with storm after storm after storm. And then we were right on the line. We got some of that bitter cold. We pulled out. Normally this time of year for us, we should be in the upper 40s to around 50. And boy, we were a lot colder. And we're finally breaking out again today and tomorrow. But more storms predicted, just one after another, as long as El Nino's sitting out there.
What I just hope is we don't end up with hurricanes. Hurricanes are disastrous on the East Coast. They're just terrible storms when they come.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping we can avoid some of those because we were getting hit each year either tremendously large tropical storms or hurricanes, and it was like one right after the other, year after year. So I'm hoping we're going to get a break from it for a little while.
Well, I don't see a break coming for a while, so...
I know.
Hang on. Keep sandbags ready. All right, let's see. Okay, another one, I think. Oh, here's one. X-Files returns. It relaunches end of this month, and I predict it's going to be fun and a great show again. So that was a neat one. I love the X-Files, and I was thrilled that it's coming back.
Well, I wish they'd bring Deadwood back. I don't think you've ever seen it, but
no.
They kind of left it without the ending, and it's one of the best TV series I've seen, although you really couldn't put that on general television. The language was, although it was Shakespearean, it was really the Shakespearean version of gutter language.
Got it.
Classic characters, too, in there. So, everything's character-driven as far as I'm concerned.
Yes, and I think that's another thing. I think people are getting fed up enough with some of the media and what's being fed to us on TV. I think we'll have a change. I think we're going to have, everything old seems to be new again, where they're relaunching, in the movies and on TV. may not be a bad thing.
Well, I'm hoping that they allow some new creative things to come up. I mean, we see how many remakes of things from the 70s and 80s. I mean, leave what they had made then alone and come up with something new. And I'm sure it's out there. It's just they're so conservative with what they're going to fund.
Sort of like Brady Bunch meets X-Files? Now there'd be a combo.
Although I do know someone who wrote a script of The Wizard of Oz meets Saw, so...
Ooh.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Makes one wonder when they see that mix.
Well, yes, yeah. Well, you wanted creative, right? Yes,
we're not in Kansas anymore.
That's for sure. Well,
we're in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah, really. We're winding it down here, John. Anything else you got quick, or here's to 2016?
Well, I just hope everybody has a wonderful new year, and regardless of any of the bad stuff that's coming, stay in the now and think positive. It's the only way you get through life.
Yep, here. All right, everybody, stay with me. There's more to come here on America Now.